Hi, everybody. We're group number one, and our topic is farming in space. My name is Ellen.
I'm Troy.
I'm John.
And I'm Blake.
Our thesis statement is potatoes, black beans, and broccoli are the most beneficial crops for a Martian colony based on the highly nutritious qualities, resource efficiency, and sustainability.
For the keywords, we used all these keywords to try to help narrow down our search and to get the best data to use as a tool rather than a goal. In terms of our outline, we have the various things here, a skeleton of our full sentence outline, and we came up with a research question, as you may see there, and this research question was formed off of using the tools provided by the TAs to go through various searches to find a topic that's very recent, and the thesis came out from this developed question.
When formatting the PowerPoint in the Word document, our group got together and consulted with each other in order to best decide what was the best format in conjunction with what the rubric was requiring for the PowerPoint and the Word document. For the PowerPoint, we decided to use Times New Roman 12 font. Also, due to the fact our main topic was based around crops, we decided to use a green-based background to fit with the mood of the topic. Like the PowerPoint, we also used Times New Roman 12-point font. However, due to the requirements, we also have one-by-one margins throughout the entire document.
For group responsibilities, this is what we assigned each other to do and to make sure the process of developing this paper moved as efficiently as possible with multiple group meetings and an understanding of our responsibilities. Next, we have nutrition, one of the main points of our paper, and we decided through our preliminary research to develop a working knowledge of the topic. We decided that potatoes, black beans, and broccoli would be the most efficient crops to have on an isolated Martian colony. For potatoes, one of the major resources for that is that it provides all 20 essential amino acids for the human body to develop the necessary proteins. Since some of these colonists might be in a pseudo-starvation state with the limited amount of resources, having these amino acids will help provide to stave off starvation and to allow for growth and health, which comes into black beans in terms of helping ensure growth and development. Black beans, as found by Choi, Kazuke, Kim, and Friedman, they provide for strong prevention against oxidative stress diseases like Alzheimer's disease, as well as provides roughly, depending on a certain quantity, a huge amount of fiber, about 60% fiber, which will be very important in terms of digestion. Lastly, the nutrition of broccoli, and broccoli is a prime candidate out of 20,000 edible plants on this earth, as it provides a huge amount of vitamins, glucosinates, phenolic compounds, many minerals. An example of such, as provided by Ares 2013, is that it provides like 13% potassium, 8% magnesium, 7% general protein, 42% folate, so much more. And this vegetable, as well as the other two crops, help provide a nice, well-rounded nutrition, all else being equal. Now, going into the two rejected sources, the first one by Viano, this source did not really work out so well, as while it does talk about the potato, it did not quite provide the quantitative analysis I was looking for when I want to bring in numbers and mathematical formulas related to the biochemistry that makes these plants provide the best nutrition for the value. And sort of the same can be said about Conan. However, this is a case study focused on infants, and I thought at first, maybe if we're developing a long sustainable colony, that infant nutrition would be quite key. However, infant nutrition is not going to be as important when the adults are facing malnutrition. So I decided to reject this based off of the fact that it strictly applies to infants. For accepted sources by Marson, This source was wonderful in terms of providing quantitative analysis for a biochemical titled anthocyanins, and this is a wonderful source for that reason to help provide strict numbers as to why these crops are good. Santosa, instead of the case study with infants, this study was done in Brazil and was done with adults. And this is exactly why I used it, because it showed that micronutrients as well as several other major nutrients provided by black beans helped the adults and was one of the most efficient out of the 90 samples tested. Lastly would be Drunovsky, and this was a great source in terms of providing a mathematical formula in which you can quantify nutrition and dollar value, and these crops, specifically broccoli and potatoes, had the most nutrition per dollar value. And since this would be a very expensive mission, you want to save as much money as possible while maximizing your benefits.
So I wanted to focus my research strictly on photosynthesis and how exactly would potatoes, black beans, and broccoli, how could they even survive in a Martian colony? So from the research that I found, this can be accomplished through photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is defined as the conversion of light energy to chemical energy that is stored in glucose and occurs only in plants. So essentially, plants can convert human carbon dioxide into breathable oxygen as a byproduct. So as far as growing plants in space, NASA has proven that gravity does not have an effect on photosynthetic structures in a plant, therefore they can still perform photosynthesis in space. So your morphology of your beans, potatoes, and broccoli might be a little different, however they will function the same and they will still be able to eat. I also did further research on the Biosphere Project 2, which essentially proves that human colonies could exist elsewhere on this planet. This was proven through food productions like potatoes, beans, and broccoli. They emit enough oxygen to make the atmosphere breathable for humans and plants. But this also poses a question about carbon dioxide and the amount that is found in the atmosphere of Mars. So NASA also did a research project experimenting with extremophiles found in Antarctica. These microbes can withstand low temperature, low pressure, and minimal sunlight. So if these microbes were to be put on Mars, theoretically they could survive and scrub the air of carbon dioxide through photosynthesis and allow for future plant growth. For my rejected sources, Sumner, this was actually a very interesting article as far as extraterrestrial life. Could plants survive? However, as I was reading through, I actually realized that this is a science magazine rather than a peer-reviewed journal, so I decided to throw that out because it wasn't really a reliable source. Stute was actually a very good preliminary search. It had a lot of information as far as the morphology of plants and how they would be able to grow and space and things like that. However, it was primarily focused on the wheat plant rather than the 3 potatoes, black beans, and broccoli that we decided to use. My accepted sources, Campbell. This was just a general biology textbook, but it explicitly explains the process of photosynthesis. Obviously, this is going to be a reliable source because it's used in the classroom, and a lot of the information is trustworthy and became a great basic knowledge for this research portion. Milroy, this was a NASA experiment published online. It was peer-reviewed as well. It gave explicit details and experiments results that were used as far as like the extremophiles and how would it be able to be possible to have plants on Mars. And then my third accepted source was the one concerning the Biosphere 2 project by Nelson. Although this was an older source, 1994, this was actually very informational. This was actually when the Biosphere 2 project took place, therefore the older date. However, it is still relevant today, and NASA is still doing research with it as well.
My research focused on how the crops that we chose will actually perform on Mars, and whether or not the crops how the crops we chose will be efficient and based off the percentages and numbers we have on Earth and how they perform in terms of crop production. The start of my research started with a government document gotten from the Farmers PDF document found on a government site. It lists a graph of all the percentages and and based off per acre land, how much crops in particular vegetable groups, seed groups, and how many of the crops per acre of land they're actually able to cultivate on the land. Based off the numbers shown here on Earth, the crops that we chosen, black beans, broccoli, and potatoes, were all had a higher cultivation rate per acre land compared to the other crops. So based off those numbers alone, we can assume that on Mars they will have that same success. The second part of my research dealt with exactly how the atmosphere on Mars will affect the colonization and the crop production on Mars. Starting with the carbon dioxide on Mars, compared to Earth, there's 95%. Most of the air on Mars contains 95% of carbon dioxide. Naturally, the carbon dioxide is too high for humans to breathe without some form of external hardware. However, because of the high carbon dioxide, it can accelerate photosynthesis in plants, so it can be used to actually raise crop production past what was previously numbered on Earth. Second, the soil on Mars contains, within the minerals of the soil, it contains 4% of water. With technology currently, we're actually able to dig out the soil and actually boil it. What this will allow us to do is actually boil the little water that's actually present in the soil out of it and transform it into water vapor. We can then use a controlled environment to cool this water vapor and then basically cultivate that into a bottle. Because most of Mars's soil does actually contain this water, this is basically limitless resource when it comes to colonization. Lastly, the crops that we want to grow on Mars naturally can't take Mars's natural atmosphere. This is due to the fact that the atmosphere is naturally harsh due to cool temperatures and high numbers of radiation. However, with today's current technology, we do have what's called inflatable habitats. What inflatable habitats allow us to do is actually create what's called a controlled environment around the crops. The controlled environment will basically help the crops defend against the high levels of radiation on Mars, and it will also provide a constant light source for the plants so they continue to grow once given the natural carbon dioxide which is already on the planet. Here are my rejected sources. Started off with Jacobs X article. He wrote an article on how could we actually grow plants on Mars. This article was actually well written and actually had very important information in terms of Mars's naturally harsh atmosphere. It mentions a lot about how naturally we would not be able to actually cultivate any plants on Mars due to the high levels of radiation, the cool temperatures in general, and just a harsh atmosphere. Originally, I was going to use it, but the author makes too many references to the movie known as The Martian, and he makes those at random points within the article. It was hard to tell whether or not what was being said was an actual fact that was actually found in either like a form of a database, a government database, or NASA database, whether or not he was quoting from the movie The Martian or getting information from the movie. Because it was basically impossible to tell whether it was the database or the movie itself, I decided to totally reject the article itself, because I didn't want to risk the fact of having facts based off of a movie affect my research. My second rejected article by Bob B. Primarily focused on the dry bean yield within the United States in 2011. This article actually did have important information about the yields of dry beans, including our black bean that we yield within every year. The issue with the article, though, was the date, 2011. As I was doing more research, I actually found a more updated article, which was for 2015. I ultimately decided to go with the numbers from the 2015 article as it was more recent than the 2011 article. My first accepted resource was from Robert Z., The Case for Mars. It's a old but great personal textbook written by Robert Z., which details the technologies and ways, and basically way NASA was getting ready for colonization on Mars back in 1996. While it had several references to the technologies such as the habitat from earlier, and also had information about Mars's general atmosphere and the reason why the habitats will be necessary. At the time when they're writing, the habitats weren't yet ready, but there was definitely a parallel between what's being said now and what was said and what we have currently. My next accepted article was will astronauts have enough water, food, and oxygen? This is actually an article on NASA's database due to the Mars One project. This article detailed very useful information about the current conditions that colonization return had to face in terms of how much water, food, and oxygen is currently on the planet and what will actually have to be brought in from Earth. My last article, which I said that was Crop Production 2014 Summary. This summary actually has the crop productions between 2014, 2015, and a little bit of 2016 combined. This article basically has a full-fledged detail of all the crops in the United States, how much yields that we get one per acre of land, and how much resource we have to spend to actually yield these arcs for them to grow. So naturally, this article was very helpful in determining whether or not the crops we chose were the most efficient for Mars.
My research dealt with the difficulty in growing plants on Mars. Due to the lack of oxygen on Mars, plant roots cannot take up oxygen like they normally would on Earth. The low oxygen atmosphere means that most plants will not be able to survive because they have evolved in an atmosphere of between 20 and 50 millibars. Mars also lacks cyanobacteria, necessary for the nitrogen cycle to happen and for plants to be able to use the nitrogen. Successive generations of plants will be used to create an atmosphere capable of creating flowering plants which will produce food. However, these issues can be overcome by using enclosed habitats to grow the plants. My rejected sources are as follows. Prince, this source relied on food that was grown on the space station and not on the surface of Mars or a similar surface. And in the space station, they had proper requirements for the life. And also fog, and this article did not go in depth about the limitations of terraforming Mars, and it did not supply enough information for this project. My accepted sources, the first one is BIFOG, and this article does go in depth about the limiting amounts of oxygen on the Mars atmosphere and why plant roots need oxygen to function. My next was by Graham, and he talks about how most flowering plants require an atmosphere level of between 20 and 50 millibars, and on Mars, the planet, lacks this atmosphere. Eamar Friedman talks about cyanobacteria, which is the key player in the life of plants because it breaks down nitrogen and other molecules into usable forms.
These were some of the references that we had on our Word document, so we're just going to flip through here. We had quite a few.
I'm John Groschel. I'm a biology major with a marine concentration, and I'm a junior at Old Dominion University.
I am Blake Steiner. I am a rising senior here at Old Dominion University, wanting to get my bachelor's in biology and then get my master's.
Hey, I'm Ellen. I'm a rising junior. I'm pursuing a biology degree and I'm thinking about going into teaching.
Hi, I'm Troy Calvert. I'm a junior at Old Dominion University, and I'm here for my major in computer science and minor in computer engineering.